Thank you for checking out another project video. My name is Mitch. You're watching Made by Mitch, where I show you the things I make and what I learned making them. Today, we're gonna be making this DIY farmhouse headboard, so let's check it out. So for this headboard, I started from the inside part and then worked my way towards the outside. So the first thing I had to do was cut all of the slats to size that would make up the middle section of the headboard. After I got all of my planks cut to size, I used a random orbital sander and I sanded everything up to 220 grit. I made sure to sand the inside edge of each of the boards so that way when I put them all together, you can see a groove in between, and it made these planks look a lot better. Next, I laid them all out and got them lined up, and then I cut a couple pieces of 1x2 to run across the length of all of the boards, and then I just used a finish nailer to just tack them all in place. This is making up the inside portion of the headboard, and I would build around it later on, and so it doesn't have to be extremely sturdy at this point. I'll be fastening everything together here in a bit. And once all of my slats are positioned where they need to be, then I could go in and cut the 2x6 that would make up the bottom and the top part of the inside portion. So I flipped it over, and then I'm marking here now where I'm going to be putting pocket holes into these sections. So then I grab my 2x6, put pocket holes along the edge that would go into the inside part I just made, and then I would fasten that together. This part is the bottom of the headboard, and then I would go in and do the same thing for the top of the headboard. So I decided to change up the design a little bit, mainly because this headboard is going to be hanging on a wall. It's not going to have legs or anything like that. So I've decided to make the top board and the bottom board the same size. I think aesthetically it'll look a lot more intentional, and I think it'll match a little bit better. So let's check it out. Alright, so I had a small mess up when I cut the bottom board. I cut it too short. So to avoid going back to Lowe's for a third trip for another board, I've decided just to take a 1/4 inch off of the 2x4s that go on the ends and then on the top board as well. So the initial plan was not to rip off a bit of these 2x4s, but to compensate for my mistake. It was the easiest way to make everything fit the right way. I'm using 2.5 inch screws for this part. The majority of the weight of this is going to be hinging on these joints here, so that's why I'm using the longer ones for this part. So it's starting to take shape at this point. The next thing I had to do was just start to add the rest of the trim pieces. So I added the 1x2 to create the final border around the inside part, and then I would move on to creating more of some decorative pieces along the different parts of the headboard. Now this is all preference. You can do whatever you want in this scenario. I will have a list of all the different trim pieces that I used in the description below, so check that out. I used a toe kick piece and mitered the corners to go all the way around the inside of my border. And by the way, I'm using a finish nailer to attach all of these trim pieces throughout the rest of the project. Next, I attached a top cap. I just used 1x3 to put that on, and then I just measured out how far from each side I wanted it to be, and then used the finish nailer to attach it to the top. Then I used a couple other decorative trim pieces just to make it look a little bit better. Again, I'll link all of those that I used in the description below. Now I mitered all of these corners for these pieces. It took me a few tries to get the cuts right, but I just kept trying until I got what I wanted. So I just finished up with all of the assembly. The last thing I did was put the trim pieces on, so I think everything is good to go. And now it's time for me to start the finishing process. So I'm gonna use this wood filler to go in and fill in all of the nail holes, and then it's time to paint. I let the wood filler dry overnight, and then I came back in with some sandpaper just to smooth everything over. I went back and forth on how I wanted to finish this headboard, but I decided to try something new. And so first I applied a really thick coat of Minwax's weathered oak. I let that dry for a few days, and then I went back in with several coats of white stain, also from Minwax, to get a weathered white look that I was going for. I would not recommend doing it this way. It did take a long time. So I'm up here finishing up the headboard here in my garage, and a few days ago I put on the last coat of polyurethane, and I ran into a huge problem. I put in several coats of white stain on this because it just wasn't taking the way that I needed it to take. I finally get to where it's looking good, and then I put a clear coat of polyurethane on it. So I wanted to try something new for this project, so I tried out this one coat polyurethane by Minwax. So you're supposed to only put one coat on it, and it's supposed to be all that you need. It's not supposed to turn yellow. But that's a problem because my headboard is white. So what I did was I started sanding down the places that were yellow once it dried, and this stuff just peels off. When I tried scraping off this coat of polyurethane, it started peeling off, and this is what it did to my finish. So I sanded down the places really well that needed fixed, and then I kept adding coats of white stain until it matched the rest of the headboard, and then I finished it off with my coat of polyurethane. And after the finishing process was complete, it was time to finally hang the headboard, and to do this I used French cleats. I have a video where I talk all about French cleats. I'll link that in the description. After attaching the cleats to the back of the headboard, we could attach the other part of the French cleat to the wall. And to do this, I first used a stud finder to find all the studs in the wall, then I attached the cleat to the wall. And also, make sure you use a level in this process. After this, we could hang the headboard. This project was a lot of fun to make. I learned a lot along the way. There were many mistakes, but many things learned. If I were to do this over, I would change the way that I finished it, but other than that, it turned out just the way that I wanted it. If you like this video, I'll link a couple other project videos that I've done in the past that you might enjoy. Thank you so much for checking out this video. We'll see you in the next project.